Cameron, have you heard that trend about milk and like the political leanings behind milk? So
What did you just say?
if you go to
Did
a
you say
coffee shop,
milk?
yeah, milk, and you order something with like whole milk, they like label you a Republican, or if you order it with like oat milk, you're like a full on socialist or something like that. Like
No,
it's
I
like this
didn't.
whole
Is
it's
that
this whole,
really a thing?
yeah, it's like the funniest joke to me. And so now every time I order coffee, which I just got some, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm like, what does this person think I am? Are they like trying to guess my political leaning? Well, you'll never know. You'll just never know. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I feel like either you're a Republican or you're a barista, because baristas drink whole milk and nothing else. So
Oh, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, if you're a true connoisseur, you know, you got to be open to all the milks, right? Juliana, she's my girlfriend. She's a little bit lactose, so like she's like, no, dude, I don't touch that. I don't touch any of that, cow juice or whatever.
got that Oatly.
That's right.
Got to squeeze those oats. Hello and welcome
However
to
you wanna
Cinema
put it.
Spectator, a show where an expert and a casual movie fan watch movies in the cinematic canon. Today we watched The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder, starring Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. My name is Cameron Tuttle, and I'm joined with Isaac Ransom today. How are you?
I have been way better, but this week has just been whack. And I would just want to, just for a moment, just shout out to Cameron. Cameron and I have been podcasting together for a long time. You are one of the most patient people, Cameron. Like, seriously, my schedule and emotions have been totally whack. Maybe this is TMI for you guys, but I don't know. Work was just driving me up the wall. Like, I feel like I'm at a level of stress currently in my life where it was like I was having a hard time breathing. Maybe it's just all the bad food I've been eating, but it's really getting to me. So I appreciate Cameron. I appreciate you guys, audience listeners. This isn't late. It's a miracle, but we did lose an hour of sleep. I don't know how we're going to get through this one. That's why I got coffee. But yeah, I've been better. How about you, Cameron?
I've been doing all right. Yeah, we were supposed to watch Some Like It Hot last week. It's all right. We'll do it next week. No big deal. We have a good show lined up, though, because I love this movie, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. And
Oh, yeah.
before we get into that, I guess, what have you been watching? I've been really trying to catch up because the Oscar nominations are coming out on the day that this airs. So I've been trying to catch up on movies from this year. But what have you been watching?
Well, I really only watched one film, like for real, this week, and it was Jojo Rabbit. I watched it with Glenn, my brother, who had never seen it, and it was just a joy to experience with him. That movie is much better than I remember, and I loved it when I saw it. I saw it multiple times in theaters. It's very colorful, a disorienting array of themes and style in that movie. Like there's so many quirks to Taika Waititi and his the way that he directs and puts things together. From like there's very strange German music in the movie, which I love, and it's very like indicative of his style from his other films as well. But yeah, the movie's just heartfelt. It tackles issues that shouldn't be possible to be like, well, not that they shouldn't be possible, but he does it in a way that is so entertaining and convincing and warm. Like there's this warmth to the movie that is great. So if you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, give it a chance. That's all I'm gonna say. Give it a chance. It is beautifully shot. If you can't find anything else, just enjoy how gorgeous the movie looks. But I think you'll find something you like.
I agree. I love Jojo Rabbit. I think it's genuinely like one of the best movies that's come out in a long time. I think it's really, really spectacularly done. So yeah, I would highly recommend watching that if you haven't seen it yet. We talked about that, right? Didn't we? Jojo Rabbit.
I think
at one
maybe
point?
in our old show we mentioned it. I don't think it ever got like a full
review
or anything like that. But
well, this week I watched 3 movies. I watched We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a movie from 2011 or so, directed by Lynn Ramsey. It's a great movie. I mean, it's just devastatingly sad and depressing, but it's really great. And it's kind of the opposite of Jojo Rabbit, where like Jojo Rabbit grapples with difficult things in a humorous and heartfelt way, and in like a very warm way. And this grapples with really dark things in like a real and honest and personal way. And as depressing as it is, I think it's just a masterpiece. I think it's so good. But yeah, and then I watched On the Rocks with Bill Murray and Rashida Jones. It's the newest Sofia Coppola movie. It's on Apple TV Plus. It was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was definitely one of the best movies that I've seen this year. Just a standout movie. I thought it was a lot of fun and a really interesting depiction of fatherhood and, things like that. So I definitely would recommend watching that if you haven't seen it. And then I also watched Judas and the Black Messiah a couple nights ago. And I'm still not sure necessarily if like what I think about it. I definitely enjoyed it, and stylistically it's really, really gorgeous. It's I can't remember the director's name, but the cinematographer is Sean Bobbitt, who's just done incredible work. And he hits it home again in this movie. I think it does slow down a little bit in the middle. The pace is a little bit weird, I would say, but overall, I think it's a really strong movie, and it definitely has outstanding performances all around. So, yeah, that's my wrap up for this week. I've been trying, like I said, to catch up on movies that came out this year. So,
yeah, well, that's cool. Cameron, from the three, is there one that you'd recommend, or?
Well, I would definitely recommend watching We Need to Talk About Kevin, if you haven't seen it already. As far as new movies, I would watch On the Rocks. It's just a fun, like sweet, heartfelt movie that has, a lot of good stuff to it. So I would definitely recommend it. Watch it, for date night or something, and it's a nice movie. It's a lot of fun. So,
well, great. Yeah, this is Cinema Spectator, a show where a expert and casual review the movies, and we're gonna get into the movie. Cameron, you're shaking your head because you're not reading the script, Cameron. I can tell. He's like, dude, he flubbed it. Yeah, so we post every Monday. You can support us at patreon.com/ECFS Productions. Throw a couple dollars our way. Get a commentary track. Get your questions read on air. All those special benefits. So go there if you want to support the show. Alongside, you can give us a rating on iTunes. Tell friends and family. That is how the show grows. Today's film is The Apartment. Cameron is the expert. He picked this one out. It's an interesting choice. We're doing Billy Wilder month this month. So, Cameron, give us a little bit of intro and backdrop into it.
Yeah, definitely. So, The Apartment, this is kind of later-ish in Billy Wilder's career. He, like I said last week, he's gone through a couple different periods of his career, a couple different periods in his life. He started off with working as mainly just a writer in the writer's room at Paramount. He worked with Charles Brackett a lot, and he always had a writing partner that was like he couldn't write without a writing partner, basically. And so he wrote with Charles Brackett in the first half of his career. They did a couple Lubitsch pictures and a couple of his own. And then actually after Sunset Boulevard in 1950, he got in a big fight with the studio head at Paramount, obviously, because that movie's kind of inflammatory towards how people are treated in Hollywood and towards the executives and whatever. And so he started swearing at the owner of Paramount and stormed out of his office, and it was kind of a big hubbub. And so he, after that, he moved on. He started making less studio pictures, more. Basically, in that time, there was a system of owning your writers, owning your actors, owning your directors. So the studio, Paramount, they would offer you a contract to do, a certain amount of pictures in 10 years or whatever. It's kind of like a baseball contract or like a sports contract in that way. And so he left, and after that he was like, I'm never being under contract again. I'm just selling one picture to one studio. So in the 50s, that's where you get kind of this explosion of Billy Wilder movies that were, he had a bit of a rough go after Ace in the Hole flopped, and he had one other major flop that didn't do so well. And then after a couple of years, he started working with Marilyn Monroe. He started working with Audrey Hepburn, and that's when he kind of came into the mainstream, was able to bring his name up again. And Some Like It Hot was really his like probably the high point of his career. This was the movie he made directly after Some Like It Hot, after his kind of biggest movie, biggest production, most critically and commercially acclaimed movie too. And this one was another, he hit it twice. So, this was another one that people just loved when it came out. I believe I'm trying to look at the Oscar nominations. I can't remember. Oh yeah. So it won 5 Oscars. It won for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, and Best Editing, and then Art Direction. And then it was nominated. All of the actors were nominated as well. So this was a hit in its day. This was definitely a big moment for him. And yeah, right in the middle of his career, and it's still to this day one of his most longest lasting and most well-known movies. So
well, yeah, no, I think it was definitely an interesting experience coming off of Witness for the Prosecution that we watched last week. That movie was before this, and
yes.
He's kind of climbing back up after his flop of Ace in the Hole, right?
Yeah.
I'm bummed. I know that we were supposed to watch Some Like It Hot before this, but I think even without knowing a ton of the context of what happened around that movie, and just knowing that this is when he was a little bit in the spotlight, thematically, this movie is super interesting to me. And it's rare for me as a casual movie viewer to come alongside these movies and sort of listen to the creator or the director in the moment. Like it's I think hard for people to not get wrapped up in the plot or style or production of a movie. More often than not, you don't hear the voice of the person that had a vision behind the project, right? And I think Wilder absolutely captures that in this movie, and it's almost impossible to ignore it for me, because just I don't know if it's directly paralleled, or it's the fact that I have context in the way he was rejected from Hollywood and sort of struggled with that. But like, this movie is aggressive towards like maybe a work life that is too real to him, right? And I'm not sure if it's supposed to like directly correlate with his career in any way at all, but that's just sort of what I began to pull from it, whether I liked it or not. I was like, there's too much authenticity in the way that the characters come across and the structure of life that these characters experience, where it's like it's so real that they had to pull from some sort of like inspiration that was kind of close to home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what I've been finding like just so great about these Wilder films is, we talked about Sunset Boulevard having great characters, Witness for the Prosecution, just these characters that are bigger than life. And then it's almost like this movie, and again, I don't have the context of Some Like It Hot, but this movie's like, I know my characters are great. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not something that is flaunted. It's just shown. It's just shown, and it's unapologetic. And he's like mastered that craft. So he's going above and beyond in this movie to just, really drive at a dystopian sort of like workplace, but also a deep dive on a flaw of character, which is like people pleasing, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is something that is so applicable to so many situations in life. Just personally, it's like outside of career, outside of even relationships and things like that. Like this movie is very deep. And I did not expect this movie to approach it in this way, because I just like from the other movies I've seen by Wilder, and coming off very high from Witness for the Prosecution, which I loved. I absolutely recommended that movie. I still think about it. You know, Cameron, after that episode, I didn't tell you this. That's the other movie. I watched it again. Like,
really?
No joke. Like, right
Wow.
after. I was like, Mom, Dad, you guys got to watch this movie. Like, I was like, you guys just have to.
Yeah.
And they loved it. They thought it was great. And so because they enjoyed it, and my mom was like, I liked it so much, like, I said, well, hey, I'm watching another Wilder movie this week, if you guys want to watch The Apartment. So we watched it together. My entire family was like, let's go, you know? Very different. This movie is very different than that, right?
It is, yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to get into the plot, but it is cynical and pretty depressing, like all the way through. And there was a halfway point where I looked over at my dad, and he was hunched over in his chair, like just completely like almost like just disgusted by the film, because it was really making you uncomfortable with the situation and what was happening in the movie. And I was like, man, I don't know where this movie is going to go, because I know that Wilder is a little bit, actually very much cynical, right? And I was like, and I don't like his movies usually end pretty tragically in some ways, you know?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And so I'm sure we're going to get into the ending, but overall, this movie is very mature, I think. It's very, very mature, and it executes on what it aims to do well. I do think that the movie has a little bit of pacing problems in the middle, where I was beginning to think like, okay, I don't really know where this is going or what exactly is happening, because it seems like we have our cast of characters and they're doing the thing that they're doing, and I'm not convinced on any sort of direction. But this movie hinges on drama. So once events begin to take place, particularly with let's see, Fran's character, right? When she kind of pushes the plot along, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
That's when it picks up, and I forgot to think about like pacing, I guess. Like when you start thinking about pacing, you're like, that's not good. And then I forgot about it once that event happened. So overall, I really enjoyed it, and I was surprised a majority of my family really liked it too, despite the depressing nature of the movie. So
yeah. Did your dad end up like turning around on it?
Yeah, I asked him this morning after he had some time to sleep on it, and he was like, yeah, that movie was really good. Like he enjoyed it. And he said, I was very afraid that it was going to end in a way that would just make me feel like I wasted my time. But instead, you know, the ending, the resolution is a statement about some of the themes, right? It is saying like to take action, I guess, in a positive way, which, you know, not all movies have to kind of shout out to the audience in that regard, but I think it's done quite tastefully and with very much a Wilder string of drama. That scene where Fran is running up the staircase is
it's amazing.
It's excellent. It's so, oh my gosh, dude. My entire family was on the edge of their seats right then. So
what I love about Wilder, I think you put it really well, in that his movies really never feel like they end and they've wasted your time. You know, he always finds some way to hit it out of the park in the end. You know, there's always something that stands out about the ending of all of his movies. You know, even Double Indemnity, which you didn't like as much as the other ones, the ending is what you think about a lot. For me, it is. You know, and there's always. It's usually a combination of character moment, right, and a finality to the plot, or a sort of a conclusion that makes you satisfied in terms of the plot and where it's gone. And I think this is totally the same. You know, this is very similar in that way. So yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we should get into a bit of the plot and sort of where it goes. I would say this one is a little bit more plot driven than a lot of his other movies. You know, his movies are funny because there are I would say there's like two categories of his movies. There's really a lot, but there's two categories of his movies. There's like his comedies and then his straight dramas. And his comedies I find are a little bit more character driven. They're a little bit more you know, the plot is not quite as central, even though it's still, you know, it's still moving you in a direction. But really, the idea is like the scenario and the drama around the characters, and you know, that's where the comedy comes from. And then his dramas a lot of times are also very character focused, obviously, but the plot is kind of what keeps you one of the hooks, right? You know, the plot where it's going is one of the hooks. This movie is different because it's a combination. You know, it's both a comedy and a drama, and it takes both of the amazing things from you know, from those realms, and it mixes them together, and it makes something that's a little bit more like it's a deeper movie in some ways than some of his others. So
well, it's interesting that it was put down as a comedy, because my beginning to watch it does not feel like a comedy.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, like, cause I told my whole family, it's like, oh yeah, it's right here. It's it's comedy. And then we start watching it and everybody's kind of scratching their heads like, wait, this is not that funny. You know? Yeah. I think one of the things that I enjoy about Wilder is that his comedy, although like it probably doesn't make a modern audience laugh. Instead, those jokes and those like elements of wit come across as like timeless dialogue. Yeah. Despite the joke not landing in some ways. There was a moment where Fran's brother is like, who's buddy boy, right? Like that's and I looked at Glenn, neither of us were laughing, but we were like, that was probably a laugh out loud moment, like back in the 60s, you know, like people are like, oh man, that's so funny. Instead, it's just clever now, right? It's well set up. But I think that's a compliment in my book, because it's not often that I watch an old movie and like I'm dying of laughter. To be honest, like slapstick is the only comedy that I think from like old like black and white movies that just almost outdoes maybe modern comedies in a way. But I will say, I think comedies are hard for me. There's not a lot of like talking comedies, I guess you could say, that really make me laugh out loud. I'm more into the absurdist or situational comedy in films. So maybe I just have a warped view of what a comedy is, but
no, I think that's true. I think his movies are less like drop dead funny and more witty and just excellently written. You know, like there's moments that you're like, wow, that was like so well set up. You know, that was so well put together. But I mean, you're right. Like I think there were two moments that got genuine laughs out of me watching it this time again. But for the most part, I mean, that's not really the point either. And one of my criticisms of sort of modern comedies is that they're jokes first and movies second.
Right.
And
right.
I think the nice thing and the fun thing about Wilder's movies, especially his funnier movies, is their movies first and jokes second, you know, and that works for me better because I'm not expecting a laugh. I'm expecting an excellently written movie, and if I get a laugh, then I'll, you know, I'm happy with that. Yeah,
and there are some great moments in this film where it's just like you can't help but smile. I think, like I don't know much about Jack Lemmon and really like what he's in. I didn't even really know his name before. Like, to be honest, watching this movie with my parents was really entertaining because they're like, "Oh, we love Jack Lemmon, we love Fred McMurray," you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Who? You know, I don't know these people, right?"
Well, you do. Fred McMurray was in Double Indemnity, so
was he really?
he was the guy. He was the main guy in Double Indemnity.
Wow, I couldn't have even.
He was
guessed.
Older. He's older. Yeah, in this movie.
I don't know. He doesn't look older. I don't know what it is. That movie, like, maybe it's just he's acting so different that it's unrecognizable.
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah,
he's so sympathetic in this movie. You know, he's like a kind of like a puppy getting kicked around or something.
Fred
like that.
McMurray?
No. I thought you were talking about Jack Lemmon.
No. Fred McMurray.
Oh, okay.
He's the boss. He's the boss.
Yeah. All right. No, I totally believe that now.
Yeah.
I was like, you're telling me Jack Lemmon is the guy?
No. Fred
I was
McMurray.
like, oh man. I swore that you just said. I was like, I'm going crazy now. Like,
no.
I can't even picture that guy's face. You know, on.
No. Yeah.
Yes, Fred. Okay, that I realize that now. Okay, yeah, I believe that. No, but Jack Lemmon's super sympathetic, and we're talking about comedy, right? Like that whole story when he's like serving spaghetti, he talks about shooting himself in the knee.
Yeah,
like that part is hilarious, dude. and it's so in character too, because he's trying to like wow Fran, right? He's really trying there. And
he's telling just like a terrible story about himself.
Yeah, tell a terrible story about him trying to commit suicide, and he's just smiling, right?
And he's like, "Oh no, I was fine."
Yeah, it's also like it gels so well with everything that's going on in the movie. Yeah. It's man, it is expertly put together, right? So I think, okay, but we should definitely get into the characters. We're going to get into spoilers too, because as we talk about these characters, we have to discuss their moments.
Yeah. And their conclusions too.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Let's
do a little overview of the plot, I would say, before we do characters.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, this story is about sort of a low-level office worker who, by happenstance, just by sort of the luck of being around, poor people in the office, he ends up lending his apartment out while his coworkers are having affairs. And so he gets himself into a situation where he, basically every night of the week, he's lending his apartment out to his coworkers, and he has to reschedule them. And, he's sort of running this mini hotel just because he said yes one time, and he's kind of being taken advantage of here. And really the idea for him is that he's using it as a way to move up in his job. That's kind of his goal. And so throughout the plot, he gets into bigger and bigger roles in the company, and he also ends up learning bigger and bigger secrets, essentially. And the biggest one is that his boss, his real boss, he ends up taking the girl that he's interested in to his apartment, and that's sort of where the drama lies in most of the movie. So,
and that's like, I think you summarized it perfectly. But just hearing that, right? Like, that's a thick, juicy like drama setup, right?
Yeah,
like it's not light. It doesn't feel light in the movie, but there are these breaths of fresh air. Little comedic moments, and I'd say that there are supporting characters that just kind of, like, I'm not one to be like, I want to go watch a drama film, honestly, right? Like, I usually like a little bit of other like other structure to make the drama elevated, right? But it is in the full frontal focus of this film, like. The description is heavy, and the comedic elements are more of the supporting role versus it being a comedy, like you were saying, comedy first, plot or movie second, right? No, like there was intention behind this very depressing plot. I mean, it's I don't know, like watching it, there's all these disgusting men who are like hooking up in his apartment, and the guy like has to sleep out on the street some nights, and it's just
and
like,
he has to like clean up after them, and like they always leave things there, and it's kind of, it is very cynical about sort of the workplace and the nature of working and cheating on your wife, and like it's in some ways it's kind of a surprising movie for the 60s, because this was before this was still during the time where movies were censored, and you could tell there's the one thing I love about Billy Wilder is he is such a profound user of innuendo, and that's what I think makes his movies genuinely witty. Is everything means something else. Every moment or every line of dialogue is kind of laced with double meaning and with innuendo. And especially in this movie, I mean, the whole movie centers around sort of the idea of having affairs, the idea of being unfaithful to your wife, and and then also using sex or using favors to get ahead in your life and get ahead in certain areas. And it's a very mature plot. It's not one that you would normally find in a movie from this era. And yet it does it in a way that is totally above the censors, totally above board, and very clever and very funny. It doesn't feel immature either.
I could tell, like, my parents are very moral people, and watching this film with them, there's nothing inherently like explicit, right? Because they're not going to show nudity or, anything disgusting like that, right? But they were just unsettled, I think, by the entire display, and even I think they were even more uncomfortable because it was an old movie. They were like, wait, this is not supposed to be like in an old movie. But they were won over by it for sure. Because it has something to say about all of it, right? It doesn't make you linger there for no reason. And there was a moment where I thought it might, but it definitely picks up, and the breath of fresh air that is breathed into this heavy plot is the supporting actors and jokes and all that stuff. Even Jack Lemmon himself is very like pleasant to see. But I gotta shout out Dr. Dreyfuss.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
He is just
he's wonderful.
Excellent. From his opening lines about
be a mensch.
Yes. The opening lines about him donating his body to science and things like that, right? Like, that's such a funny oh man, like, and he's so you just love him. It's like quintessential Wilder character. Shows up, 3 lines, and you're already in love with the guy, and his wife too. She has like one scene basically, and you'll love her, her right away,
Yeah. And people who could be like them too.
Right.
There's like it's almost like the synthesis of like 4 different people that you might know. And that's what makes his characters so great, is they're not just like well-written people and well-written characters, but they're like they're people who are relatable and who you might know or you might walk into on the street. They're totally real human beings, real people that you can tell.
Yeah, and so I mean, like, all the supporting characters are Wilder classics, but it really does center around this love triangle that is struggling with a power dynamic, and it's whack, man. Like, it is a weird relationship between all of them. Fran being the elevator girl that that Jack Lemmon's character falls for. Baxter. CC Baxter. What's his first name? It's not CC.
I think they say it like in the opening lines.
They just keep calling him Buddy Boy.
They call him Baxter or Buddy Boy.
Oh, jeez, what a obnoxious! Like my brother and I were playing Super Mario afterwards because we've been trying to beat this game together, and like just because it's devolved into just brotherly hatred. Playing this game, like we just murder each other in the game and try to hurt each other to get through the levels of this Mario game, and it was just constant buddy boys last night. Constant. After that movie, it didn't end.
Buddy boy.
Yeah, come on, buddy boy, you're behind or whatever. It was brutal. I honestly hate the phrasing, but it's obnoxious.
And the people who say it are obnoxious too. Like they're the most like, ugh, you hate them already.
Yeah. So, we've talked about Jack Lemmon a little bit. Let's talk about Fred McMurray, and then we'll get into Shirley MacLaine too.
Yeah. Fred McMurray is the boss, kind of the big, either the CEO or a top executive in this company, which is like an insurance company with like 30,000 employees or something. They mentioned it at the beginning, how like they have to stagger the opening and closing times because they need 30,000 people to leave the elevator or whatever. And so he, he's sort of the big boss, the big man in this company. And the first thing that you see of him is, Jack Lemmon's character gets called into his office, and he's kind of writing him the riot act about letting his apartment key float around. And he tells this sob story about, when there's one bad apple in the bunch, blah blah blah, and we're a family business or something like that. And by the end of the conversation, the audience realizes that he's asking for the key to the apartment, but Jack Lemmon's character isn't catching on at the beginning. And so what you realize throughout the film is that he's been sort of leading this double life of being a upstanding guy who has a wife and kids, and is a good moral character, and then behind their back he's been dating everyone in the office essentially. So his character is you find out fairly quickly that he's been seeing the elevator girl Fran, who Jack Lemmon is interested in, and so there's the dramatic irony of you knowing that they've been seeing each other, but he doesn't know. Jack Lemmon doesn't know, and he takes her to Jack Lemmon's apartment, and and they're in this relationship where he keeps saying that he's going to leave his wife, and he keeps being like, I love you, Fran, I'm going to leave my wife for you. And then he never ends up going through with it. And there's sort of this back and forth in that area. And spoilers, I guess, right? Are we spoiling?
Yeah, go for it.
Spoilers, but he does end up leaving his wife in the end. And for Fran, he does end up moving it. Well, yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, yes, he ends. Obviously, the implication is that he doesn't really care about her. He just doesn't like his wife. And he says, "I'm going to enjoy the bachelor lifestyle for a little bit," and blah blah blah. But he is, his plan is to move in with Fran, and so by the end,
but he does say a lot throughout the plot, and Fred McMurray's character is you just really hate him in this movie. I think,
totally.
He does say a lot where it's like, oh, the same old spiel. Tell the girl that you're gonna leave the wife, but you can't. They don't understand, right? And the only reason he ends up leaving is because his secretary tattles on him.
Yes.
And that's how he's kind of thrown out by his wife.
Yeah.
But he's, of course, being the cocky horrible person that he is like, no, I finally left her for you, you know? It's like, I'm not convinced, you know? Even Fran's character is like, oh, he's a liar. Like, I can tell. He's been lying for a while. So, yeah, I think he had this moment for me where it's like, there's a charm where you like him for kind of cracking down on Jack Lemmon's character about the key in that first introduction. As a matter of fact, I was like, I bet you Fred McMurray is gonna kind of be a vigilante for the company here and have a little fun, you know? And there was a hopeful side of me. I was like, that would be really funny where they continue to have those executives come over and he's just sitting in the chair like to catch a predator or something like that. And he's like, what are you doing? You know, like that. I was like, what a fun thing this is going to be. And then he's like, no, I want the key. And I'm like, oh no. Oh no. This has gone south. And it was just funny because my mom was like, I love Fred McMurray. And watching this, she's like, I hate Fred McMurray. So like, yeah, it was, he really pulled out the evil antagonistic force in this movie. And you just, I don't have much to say about his character besides the fact that he's irritating. You really don't like him. That's not where I found a bunch of enjoyment besides the fact that he's just like, he represents the force that is powerful or is considered to have power over Jack Lemmon's character. And this is where like a little bit of the commentary around like maybe blackmailing or being a yes man like can be sort of broken down, right? Because the conclusion of the movie is Jack Lemmon's character being like, you know, Baxter's like, I'm not gonna help you anymore, right? To this, you know, evil, powerful liar, right?
Yeah.
And it's suddenly like he's lost it. Like he just doesn't have power over Jack Lemmon, and that's like such an exciting conclusion. I'm sure we'll get into like implications and meaning at the end, but like he is a physical representation of that force that's pressing against the protagonist, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Fran for a little bit, because I think she has a lot of complexity in her character and motivation, almost more so than the two guys, because she's placed in this interesting situation with some backstory, very believable character, instantly likable from the beginning. You know, there's that brief introduction with her where she's kind of talking smack back, and then she gets like hit on the butt by one of the annoying buddy boy guys, and she just lets him have it, you know? And you're like, yeah,
she's
tell
like,
him,
one of these days I'm going to let these elevator doors close on you, and you're going to get your hand chopped off.
That's like, I'm like, yeah, at least somebody said it, right? You know? Yeah. So you like her from the beginning. She's obviously caught in a rough place that I think maybe as an audience member, just personally, I was like, just get out of that. Like, you don't want to be a part of that. But she constantly reminds you, because you don't know the history between her and Fred McMurray's character. She constantly says like, well, this would be so easy if I wasn't in love.
Yeah.
And she reminds you of that constantly, right? And I think as somebody who's casual and I needed kind of that reminder of character motivation, I'm like, why don't you just leave him? And then like every other line, she's like, well, it sucks that I'm in love. And I'm like, okay, oh, right. You're in love with a terrible person, right? So
yeah. And she says that she's like, why do I have to fall in love basically with the wrong people? Why do I have to you know, why do I do this to myself essentially?
Yeah.
And to be fair, you know, it's not something that I've ever understood in terms of like people's motivations of like, you know, people stay with people that they shouldn't or whatever. Yeah. I don't have any experience with that personally, but you know, people who do. And, you know, as frustrating as it can be, you do understand. You're like, yeah, I get it. You know, I get what I get how hard it is for someone who's who's being, physically or emotionally abused to leave, and stuff like that. And so in the same way, you kind of understand what Fran is saying, is like she's not in a place where she feels she can leave, in terms of, because she's still in love with him, and she still feels connected to him, regardless of how he is treating her. And she knows that she shouldn't, but she also doesn't want to leave. And that's a very real and a very human thing, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I was appreciative of how her character kind of was self-aware of her negative actions.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of helped me fall for her as a character, right? You're like, I understand the place you're in. I think that's well said, Cameron. You know somebody that's kind of been in that. It's that Wilder like stamp, It's like you feel like you know someone like that, and it's super effective in it all. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview, but I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add about Fran's character?
Yeah, so obviously she's kind of a tragic character in a lot of ways. In the middle, she tries to commit suicide, and kind of the central plot angle is that he who is in love with her and interested in her has to keep her safe, not because he's in love with her, but because of his boss. And he can't really let her leave. He's in kind of this bad situation where she's in love with his boss, and his boss is demanding that he, looks after her. And, he's caught in the middle, being like, I don't know what to do, essentially. And so, Fran's character is interesting in that she like we said, she's stuck in a bad situation. But also you feel like you're, like she's sympathetic. She's not a character who is looked on with like judgment, I guess. She's looked on more of as the tragic character, or a sympathetic character. And in a lot of ways, you kind of feel more sorry for Jack Lemmon's character, because he's like the whole time you kind of want him to be like, you want him to stand up for himself. You want him to punch above his weight and to get the girl, and you want him to take a heroic step of meaning, and not just be stepped over the entire movie, which is basically what he is. And then around what I love about the interaction with the neighbor characters is that they sort of think of him as the worst implications of everybody else, right? So he is, even though he's the upright guy who's not doing any of these things, he's looked at around him, by his community as the embodiment of all that is bad in vice, essentially.
Yeah, he takes the blame for pretty much everything.
Yeah,
right?
And so in his interaction with Shirley MacLaine's character, he finds her passed out on sleeping pills. She tries to overdose, and he runs over to the neighbor's house, who's a doctor. And while they're trying to revive her, the neighbor, who's the doctor, is like, you have to stop treating people like this, or you have to stop being this robot. And if you would have come home 30 minutes later, she would have been dead. And so he's kind of giving Jack Lemmon the riot act, and it's not him, but he takes it anyways, because he feels a certain loyalty to his boss, and a certain loyalty to her as well. He doesn't want her to lose her job, and he certainly doesn't want to lose his job. So he's kind of put in this bad situation where he has to look like the worst person ever. And and he's not. But as a character, you want him to stand up for himself.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments. I mean, even like from people that are bad to him to people that are good to him, like you want him to be understood.
Yeah.
Right? You want him to just be honest for a second. And what I think is like heartfelt about it is that the doctor character, like, they still like him, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They still like him, even though they say, oh, you know, you got to get your life together, bud. You're doing bad stuff, right? Like, they still care for him as a person too. And yeah, it's hard to see him take the blame for these things that he didn't do. But he laughs it off in a fun way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what makes the end of him turning in his executive key and, you know, walking out, essentially, I think what makes that so impactful is that he was walked over the entire time. And in many moments where you were like, just say no, or just don't do this, like you don't need to do this, and he's walked over, that's the moment where he now gets to say no. Essentially, he gets to say, I'm going to do what's right because I don't care about the consequences anymore. You can't affect me. You know, you've already taken away everything that I care about, and I'm through, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's so rewarding after 2 hours for him to finally take that stand, but then there wasn't a like instant victory in it, right?
Yeah.
He goes home and is like, well, I guess I ought to pack up and get out of town, you know?
Yeah, I have to leave.
And there's that just, like the knife twisting, right? Because he's left it. He stood up for himself. He's feeling empowered a little bit. And then as he's packing up, like, he picks up the gun that he talked about trying to kill himself with, right? And you're just like, oh no, like, please don't do this, right? Like, just because you know you can make your own decision, don't make a decision like that right now, right? Because he doesn't really have, you know, at that point, Fran was like, I'm off. I'm just going with the executive, Fred McMurray. Like, he's like, well, you know what? I'm just going to stand up for myself finally. I basically got nothing to lose at this point, right?
Yeah.
You even imagine some of his romance with Fran held him in the job that he had too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at that point, he's like, whatever. Like, that's out of the cards. Let's go for it. So, Wilder shows you the gun. You already know that he tried to kill himself with it. And then you see Fran's reaction once Fred McMurray tells her that, you know, Baxter walked out. He was done. He stood up for himself. And Fran runs off right away. She's like, oh my goodness, like, that's the guy I want to be with, right?
Yeah.
And the scene we mentioned at the beginning, right? What a just, oh man, like it's like the pinnacle of drama, because you've already seen the gun, right? She's running up the stairs and you hear the pop, and you're just like, oh no, like that. Please, like, let's not have one of those. It's like, what am I thinking of? Romeo and Juliet, like they're just barely behind each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And instead, there's like this super positive and encouraging ending where it's like, oh, he was just popping the champagne for New Year's, right? Like, what a great, what a relief, like, when the door opens, right?
Well, he's popping the champagne, and then they, you know, she comes in and they sit down and they play a rummy game, you know? And that's, it's so sweet in that, you know, there's the sort of pinnacle of drama where it's, you know, like you said, Romeo and Juliet, like it could have gone that way where, you know, star-crossed lovers, you know, she wasn't in time and blah, blah, blah. But instead it goes the total Billy Wilder way to do it, which is a moment of sort of sweet relief in some ways. from the rest of the movie.
But it's so genuine. Like,
Yeah.
The moment where Baxter looks at Fran and says, like, I adore you, you know, like, it's like, you can't just throw that in there unless you've earned it. And they earned it, you know,
Yeah.
like the movie earned it. Right. Any other situation with that kind of line would have me be like, okay, but it's worked for, and it's allowed to happen, you know, like it's set up so well. And I think that's what really like won it over for the rest of my family, is when the movie concluded, they felt like we were saying, right? You feel like you get a positive statement, a call to action at the end, right? Like, where it's like, even if you take it at surface value, everything's depressing and bad, stand up for yourself and things will go your way, right? You know, like that's as simple as you can break it down, right? It's a important reminder, I think. It is rare for movies to have a call to action and it not feel like street preaching.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And it totally does. It's a not just a call to, you know, to stand up for yourself, but it's a call about being honest, not letting people walk all over you, being a mensch, essentially, you know. And that's the Wilder touch. Totally. There's a certain you get that the movie has a certain amount of wisdom to it in a lot of ways, of like, this is him talking to maybe a younger self, or this is him talking to a younger audience, where he's saying, like, these are mistakes that you can make. You can let people take advantage of you, or you can be a mensch.
Yeah. And I think reflecting on Wilder and what he made, it makes perfect sense, right? That fall from popularity, it almost seems like he's commenting on how that was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. You know?
Yeah. You want to know the full story about that?
Let's hear it.
So why he really walked out. This is, so it had a lot to do with Sunset Boulevard, but he still was under contract to make more movies. So he had 2 more movies to go in his contract, and he made let's see. He made a movie called Stalag 17. That was the other one that I was forgetting that flopped. Okay. So it was Ace in the Hole right after, and then Stalag 17. And in that movie, it takes place in a German POW camp, in a Russian POW camp. I don't know. I actually haven't seen it. But the plot centers around essentially a spy in the camp. And in the German market, when they sold that movie, Paramount, they changed the spy from a German spy to a Polish spy. And he came from Austria. He was, all of his family was killed in concentration camps, in Poland. He, that's what he knew, and so he was so offended by that act, by the studio head, that he just walked in, and he had that moment in the apartment. He walked in and he basically said, "I'm done. I don't care, what you have to do. I'm out. I'm not making any more movies for you." And that, like you said, like it's very similar to that interaction. It's very true to life. This movie is, and I don't know. I find it so. You can tell it's just an honest movie. You know what I mean? Like, you could totally tell.
It can have a little bit of pain in it too, right? Because I think, I don't know, like, I was very conflicted in watching it, because there's a lot of excellence in the writing and the way it was put together. Even the cinematography for Wilder, which we had commented on before, like, is sometimes like Wilder doesn't have the focus on cinematography, whereas Sunset Boulevard obviously has an incredible focus on cinematography. But like Witness for the Prosecution, like I had a hard time picking out like a shot of the film. Even in my second viewing, watching it, there's some pretty great like framing and interesting camera angles, like the ones that I picked out in the movie we watched last week. In my second viewing, were like, oh, okay, like there's this great shot of Wilfred like sitting down at his like defense table, but the camera is like way up at like the spectators like thing, looking down at him, and he's like, yes, I'm taking, the pills for my heart.
Yeah.
And like so there's clever framing, but it wasn't like the centerpiece. I think this movie, The Apartment, anything outside of the apartment, but even scenes in the apartment, like the bathroom where he's like, they cleverly hide Fran's character behind like a closet door, and he's like starting to stuff away all the razors and things like that, right? Like,
yeah.
there's an attention to detail in so many elements of this film: characters, plot, drama, like delivery on comedic lines, even the cinematography. And I wanted to shout it out because I noticed it instantly in the setting introduction of the office building.
Mm-hmm.
What an incredible looking, like,
amazing shot
area. Him sitting at his desk alone with those just endless desks going down the hall and the ceiling lights. I'm like, this is just, it looks great.
What's funny about that is they in order to make that shot, they use like a big warehouse, right? But to make it look even longer and more drawn out, they scaled. So they used real people in the front, and then they used tiny desks and little kids in suits in the back as the rows went further. I find that so hilarious.
That's awesome. Yeah, like the office has a great feel and setting, and they get to work with the camera in that regard. I mean, there's a lot of there are moments in the apartment that kind of feel like moments in a sitcom to a degree, right? You're becoming familiar with the apartment and its space, but there are other scenes that they have those like frame painting shots, right, that are just great. So that's my shot of the film. I know that came up out of nowhere.
Yeah,
but
me too. I agree. It's a great shot.
Yeah, I wanted to at least give credit where it was due, because in all honesty, the Wilder films, they never, or at least the ones we're watching this month, I think Sunset Boulevard's a different story, but there was nothing that really stood out to me until this movie where I was like, oh yeah, like there's some wisdom in making film in all of it. So Cameron, do you have a shot of the film, or is that your one? The one?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an amazing shot. I also love the one like how they're framed in the both the restaurant that they go to, like in the last booth, and the New Year's Eve party, and how it's kind of it echoes those, it echoes the same framing and the same sort of interaction. I really like that shot as well. So
I know we concluded our conversation about characters, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the weird blonde chick that he picked up from the bar.
Oh, she's so funny.
Yeah, she's
like
hilarious.
Obviously New Jersey lady. Yeah, she's so funny. What do you think about Castro?
Yeah. Oh, such a good line. And yeah, man. I just didn't want to forget her. That was like, I'm looking at the time, the episode's almost over.
Yeah.
So shout out to her, whoever she is.
She's so funny. And then I love it's totally a throwaway gag that he does, but I love whenever you see like an opening elevator, and all the girls come out, the board switchers or the secretaries or whatever, they all come out, and and there's the one lady who's always talking about the guy, one of the buddy boy guys, and did you notice this?
I don't think I picked up on it.
Yeah, so he's, it'll be like the scene before, he'll be like, I had to take her out to the drive-in and in the back of the station wagon. I'm too old for that. And then the next scene, like the elevator doors will open and she walks out and she is like, he took me to a drive-in, and and it's and I just love that gag because it's so like, it's such a throwaway shot, but it always makes me laugh. I don't know. I think it's funny.
Well, Cameron, I think it's time to get into recommendations. Unless you have fun facts or anything else you want to share about this film, I know.
No, I kind of sprinkled the fun facts in there, didn't I?
I think they flowed out well.
Yeah.
We don't need a fun facts section. That's what the episode's about.
Yeah.
Recommendations. Cameron, fire away.
I think this movie is for everybody. I watched it with Kiana and she really enjoyed it. It's a heartfelt movie. It's a sweet movie. It's a very cynical and wise movie in a lot of ways. And yeah, I just think I think everyone could get some sort of enjoyment out of it. And it's not slow either. It takes you along.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the middle drags a little bit, but once Fran tries to commit suicide, that's the movie picks up the pace very quickly from there. It is difficult for my entire family to stay awake during one film. Usually one of them will pass out. That's the best way of putting it. So all eyes were open. I agree with you. I think this movie's for everyone. Despite its depressing reality behind it, there is positive truth, which I tend to gravitate towards. That's my subjective sort of, preference, I guess. But nevertheless, if the plot didn't end with such positivity and a good call to action, right? I don't think it would have the same legs that it does. It's just it's kind of perfect,
Yeah.
I think that's what's great about it. It's hard not to be positive about it. If you want to watch it, I can see you getting a little discouraged by the truth, but the best part about it, maybe of the cynical view, is that there's some fun jokes in there for you throughout it. So, highly recommend this film. I don't know if I liked it as much as Witness for the prosecution, but it is wiser. It is more craftsman, even though I thought that other movie was just incredible. I'm becoming a Wilder guy. I had so much confidence in this movie being good after Witness for the prosecution that I was like, I'm just going to allow my entire family to watch it with me.
Yeah.
And I was a little nervous at parts. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
But he did not let me down. So I'm really enjoying Wilder. I'm super excited to do the commentary track with you.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you're enjoying it. I'm going to send you a link. There's on Amazon, there's a 50-minute long documentary if you want to watch. It's called Don't Be Boring, I think. And it's it just goes through his sort of his life and his career. It kind of ends on a really sad, flat note, actually. But for the most part, I really enjoyed this documentary because it's totally an insight onto him as a person, him as a character. So I'll send you a link to it, Isaac, if you want to watch it. Not required for the show, but I think if you're interested and you want to dig a little deeper in Wilder, this is a good place to go. So
cool. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to watch it. I haven't watched a documentary in forever, so I don't know if I'll get around to it, but I would like to. Send it my way.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode of Cinema Spectator. Again, you can check us out at patreon.com/ECSF Productions. Get some exclusive stuff that we do, including the commentary track for Some Like It Hot this month. Last month's commentary track was on Empire Strikes Back, which is not a cinephile movie, but it's because Cameron was MIA.
It is.
But the commentary around it is all about scores. My brother's in not in film school, music school. So it was interesting to hear what he was talking about composition wise. You can also get exclusive access to all the other commentary tracks, we post them with a little bit of movie audio or no movie audio at all. I do both, just for you guys.
Also, don't forget, if you'd like to vote and you're a patron, if you'd like to vote in this month's last movie, please do that now. The poll is up. So yeah, go vote.
And you can check us out at YouTube. The channel is called ECFS Productions. We post this as a video feed from now on, or at least we're trying to. Cameron, do you have a post date yet, or are we just kind of like it's up in the air?
I do it every Monday, so.
Okay, awesome, yeah. It'll happen, so it will at least be up by Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of experimenting with video, so it's not going to be perfect. Cameron's got a nice camera going on. He's set up well today. Me, on the other hand, I'm on this just MacBook webcam, so we're working on it. The quality is coming, but at least we're starting. You know, sometimes you just got to start. That's what they say. So you never know where you end up. And I guess on that, we'll close. We post every Monday to iTunes and Spotify. So give us a rating and all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week. Cinema Spectator is an ECFS Productions podcast, executive produced by Darren O'Neill. If you want your name read in the credits of the show, you can check us out at patreon.com/ECFS Productions to achieve this status. Thank you, Darren, for the support, and for the rest of you, we appreciate your support as well. Have a good one.